Hi, greetings everybody, and welcome to another Jamie's Journey. And today we're in actually the port of Kusadasi, Turkey, but we've made our way almost to the ancient city of Ephesus. And I've been coming here since 1982. Every year it's different, every year it's better, and we're going to show you some of the sites, give you a little bit of the information about the city, but there is so much history, you really need a guide to learn about. But anyway, we're going to be actually heading right up to the valley, to the top of the valley, and then working our way down. But the city of Ephesus used to be a port city. In fact, where I am right now used to be all water. There's a river called the Meander River, but the Meander River started silting up not too long after the city was created. So the city was created about 330 BC. By 600 AD, the city was completely evacuated. So just picture all of this as the sea, where ships could sail right up to the city. But once the seas dried up and silted up, it brought mosquitoes. Along with mosquitoes, the human waste from the underground plumbing also came into the sea, and that created more mosquitoes, which led to malaria. And due to the malaria, people actually eventually evacuated the city. But what's great about Ephesus too is that most ruins that you visit are ruins that are built on top of ruins. For instance, Rome is the perfect example. But here, in the ancient city of Ephesus, because the city was evacuated and there were no inhabitants, if you look at the hillsides, through years of rain and dust and storm, the city actually became covered in and was protected for a couple thousand years. And just now, since really the late 1800s, did they really start to excavate this. But even since the mid-1980s, they've really upped the ante and are now doing a lot of excavation there. So we're going to take you up to the top of Ephesus, and we're glad you're here. Thank you. Oh, I tell you, I love this place. I've been here many times, and it just does something to the soul. It really does. I'm inside Ephesus now. Actually, outside the gate is where the buses let you off, relatively close to the gate, and there's some shops out there if you want to buy some souvenirs, but there's also some shops at the end of the journey. The way it works in Ephesus is you start at the top of the valley and you work your way down. You turn to the right and go across the marble street, and then eventually you'll end up at the bottom. And so if you come with a tour bus, that's where the tour bus will meet. If you come with a taxi, that's where the taxi will eventually meet you. And if you do come on your own, there are guides available. You know, this city was actually developed originally as a Greek city in the year 1334 BC. For about the first 200 years, it was a Greek city. Then it was conquered by the Romans, and so that was from about 130 BC or so. That's when the Roman invasion took place, and they took over. They say it's about 90% of the city is still covered up. Only 10% of this city is what's now uncovered, and that's what we'll see today. But what I find amazing, if you let your mind wander a little bit, and you look on the countryside and the valley here, you can just imagine all that is now covered and that someday will be uncovered. In fact, I started coming here in 1982, and so much more has been uncovered than was covered then. And of course, when they do an excavation, they do it a little bit at a time using toothbrushes. So it's an arduous task. But someday, this great city of Ephesus, which at its time was the second largest city in Rome, second largest city in the world, second to Rome. And now the entire city is covered. Anyway, we're gonna go over here and get started on our tour, and glad you're with us on Jamie's Journeys. So as you come into Ephesus, the first sight you see on your right are the Roman baths. And it was customary that whenever you come into a city, the first thing you would do is bathe. Of course, quite often disease was carried by people. So you would come in and you would wash. Now, they had actually almost 2,000 years ago, over 2,000 years ago, they actually had running water. The water came from the hillside and came down to a cistern, which was a gathering area for the water, and it just flowed through gravity. And then they had these clay pipes. Look at this. These are 2,000 years ago. You can see the pipes are made just like they are today. You have the as they call it, the male and the female end that are put together. And what they did is they took lime and egg, and together they created a mixture which sealed the pipes together. Fascinating. So all these houses had in-ground running water 2,000 years ago. Amazing. Well, we've now made our way down the road, and there's so much information, so many sights to see as you make your way down. But this is one of the places where there's always a lot of congestion because it's such a great view looking down to the library of Ephesus. And to imagine just beyond that, you see the trees beyond that, that's really where the sea began, right down there. So the port came almost right up to the city. There's a main road we're going to see that took you down to the city. Once we get down there, what people do is we head down here to reach what's called the Marble Road, and then we go to the right. Just here's a little street graffiti. In fact, you'll see this in a couple places in the site. This is just an ancient game. Probably the kids or maybe even adults used to play, and also the marble streets going up the hill were quite slippery. So you can see they put the indentations in to make it not as slippery, just like he almost went over. Also, there's a lot of places along the way where you can see the Greek characters written into the stone. And sometimes you can even understand some of the words in that. Here's some more of the Greek characters that you can distinguish here. It looks like it's probably the top of a facade, entrance to a building. Makes you wish you could read Greek. But as we said, the city was abandoned, and once it was abandoned, it was as the rains came, the grounds came down the hill and covered the area, but it's also the earthquakes that took place many, many times over the centuries that brought down this great city. Come into the terraced houses of Ephesus, and when I first came here, actually probably the first 10 years I came here, this was not even open. This was covered in 1982, just beginning to be excavated. Now it's completely covered, and some fantastic things to see here. But when you walk into the house, again, you would bathe when you come into the city, you would bathe when you come into the home. So you can see the lead pipe right there. This was like a wash basin. So as you enter in, you can see the scalloped ceiling, shaped like a seashell up there, all marble. And then the floors, all marble. We're gonna see some mosaics that are in the floor. This is all made of cut stone, cut marble. It's not painted in any way, it's the natural color. And we're gonna see some of that as we go along. Still an awful lot of excavation going on here, piecing things together, and but again, the marble on the walls, on the floor is just fantastic and so well preserved. We're going to see some frescoes. For instance, here you can see what remains of a fresco that adorned all the walls. So all the walls were plastered, and then there were these beautiful paintings all over the entire walls, which we'll be able to see more of over here. Just a great example of how the plaster was laid over the stone, about 1.5 to 2 inches thick of plaster. And then the fresco is painted over it. It still survives 2,000 years later. The color, fantastic. All right, well, we've just finished the tour of the terrace houses. That's just so fantastic. So we're going to go back to the main road, go across the street. That's Kusadasi Road is the main road we come down. It was named after the women who were called Vestal Virgins who guarded the eternal flame of the city. And that was more towards the top. We passed it on the way down, didn't really speak about it. So we're going to cross Kusadasi Road, go and show you the public latrines. And then we're going to come down and meet up with the Marble Road, which then takes us down to Harbor Road. And if we pan over this way, again, you get a better shot of some of the ruins or where the city ended right by the waterfront. You can follow it just down to the left and just picture that as a harbor, a beautiful harbor. Of course, now, as we said, 3.5 miles from the sea. So let's go on down the hill and search some more. Well, I'm now at a spot that was very popular 2,000 years ago. And you know what? It's still popular now. People love to come here and get pictures of the local toilets. Is that amazing? Nice place to sit and relax, too. So you can see the whole line goes down to a drainage system. Actually, the drainage system took it down to the harbor. All the indoor plumbing that drained down into the sea, and that was one of the problems too, as we talked about. Once the sea receded, the waste would also come out at the harbor and added to the problem of mosquitoes, which led to malaria, which led to many people dying, which led to really the death of the city. All right, the most photographed site, besides the latrines, is the Library of Celsus. And this was called a library because it contained thousands of scrolls, but also buried inside it were the people who gave the money to build that. And just an amazing structure today. Well, attention backgammon players. One of the earliest forms of backgammon. Again, I mentioned earlier in our shot today. Along here you see some places where they had little games, whether they played with dice or with coins or stones, earlier forms of dice that is. But anyway, here's a good example. Actually, there's another great example. It's kind of in the shade, so we can't shoot it, but these are scattered all over here. Here we are on the Marble Road, which will lead out and then cross with the Harbor Road. Really a main thoroughfare here, beautifully preserved. And then we're going to see the magnificent amphitheater, which will be on our right, just coming up here. We're now on the Harbor Road, or the Arcadian Road, and just about a quarter mile down, we'll show a shot of that. It was the end of the street, which is actually where the harbor began. But imagine walking up this Arcadian Road and looking up and seeing the great amphitheater. It's about 24,000 people, built again about 300 BC. Just a spectacular sight, acoustically perfect. You can stand at the base of, or the stage of the theater, and you can hear someone talk very clearly, even up at the top, even today, a couple thousand years later. Imagine what it must have been like when it was built. All right, so there's the Harbor Road with the harbor right at the end of the street. This is probably a marketplace as you entered the city. There were some baths where you could get off the ships and then bathe right at the end. Also, if you look further down, you see a hill, and that was later called St. Paul's Prison, although St. Paul was never in prison there. That's what they call it. But 2,000 years ago, it was a watchtower. So the city could see who was sailing into the bay, whether they were friends or whether they were foe. And of course, the amphitheater is where Paul preached in the area, either in it or around it, and also where they had the big gathering against the great apostle Paul, because he was disclaiming the silversmiths' creation of idols and saying that they were worthless. And of course, the silver trade was a very good trade, and so they got thousands of people together and rallied up against Paul. He was to make an appearance in the great amphitheater, but never did, and actually shortly thereafter fled the city. Here's a collection of some Roman tombs that have been found, actually not necessarily in Ephesus, but in the surrounding area of Ephesus. All right, before we go, just up over the hill is this little village in the mountain where it was said and believed that Mary, mother of Jesus, spent her final days, was escorted there by Apostle John, and they lived up there, and she spent, they figure, about 3 years up there. Also, we don't have time to get here, but if we follow this path out about 400 yards, and then we'd have to come back, is what's called St. Mary's Church. And in the 4th century, there was the third worldwide, if you want to call it, gathering of Christian leaders where they defined some of the finer details and aspects of the Christian faith. And so it was a very important church that where it took place, St. Mary's Church, but we just don't have time to get there today. All right, well, we've made our way outside the gate, and there's some shopping out here, some refreshments. Again, this is a place where you meet either your buses, or you meet your taxis, or you buy a genuine fake watch. They can do it all here. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed our little tour of the ancient city of Ephesus, a place really everybody should visit. What a fantastic spot, and you know what? It gets better every year. Thank you for joining me on Jamie's Journey. Come travel with me again. Thank you.